Black Tech Talent. Today I have this very special guest with me, Phil Terrill. He's doing some amazing things over at Microsoft, and we like to have culturally specific conversations. So we want to hear people's journey, want to hear what they're working on. We want to hear, some of the struggles and the triumphs in getting into the tech realm. And so, when I go on his LinkedIn, he's a business architect. That's just a dope name in itself. So we're going to get into this discussion, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and go into a little bit more of what that means.
Cool. Yeah, no, appreciate you for having me too, Mike.
Thanks.
Again, like Phil Terrill, on LinkedIn. I love the title too. It's kind of dope. But yeah, I've been at Microsoft now, so for about 5 years. So I've been in the tech space, kind of just learning and navigating as best I can, making the connections and all that. From Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I'll get into the business architect stuff later, but I always love saying I'm from Minneapolis, St. Paul, because usually like no one knows where that's at.
Right.
Or they pronounce it wrong. It's like Minneapolis, and I'm like, it drives me nuts. I lived in Atlanta for a couple years before Microsoft, working for a family business. And then before that, worked for a little bit right out of school for Miller Coors or Miller Brewing Company, which is now Molson Coors. So a little bit of an interesting journey to get to tech as well, from the consumer perspective to somebody that actually lives and breathes and works in that environment, especially at a company like Microsoft. So I look forward to sharing my kind of story, which is definitely probably on the different side of getting into tech than most. So.
For sure, that's what we like. So, we always try to start at the beginning of the journey. So, what kind of made you feel like, as a person of color, you could get into tech? What was kind of that moment? How old were you, and what was that introduction?
Yeah, so it's actually a good question, because I never thought I would get into tech. And it's, when I think about it now, if I knew what I know now when I was like 10, I would have spent less time trying to be a pro basketball player and more time learning how to code, write applications, all that kind of stuff. Because the reality is, it's like at some point, you're not going to the league, right? Like I say that because like when we think of something culturally specific, like as a kid, especially a young Black kid, like you think I'm either going to the league or I'm going to be a music star. It's one of the two, right? And then it's like maybe I'm going to do something in business, entrepreneurship, et cetera, if you have the exposure to that. And so why I say that is because I could have spent way more time developing all kinds of skills that would have made me lethal before being a professional.
Right.
Like, and so I give you that kind of a start because I really didn't think I would end up in tech. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to go work in corporate and have a 20-year career, and whatever happens, it's all good. Right. I probably work at General Mills, right, or Target, because that's what you think about from here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started getting my parents and my grandfather, and for people that are from here, from Minneapolis, my great grandfather had a club called the Riverview, right by Broadway Pizza in Minneapolis. And so I was exposed to a different kind of entrepreneurship. Owning a club is what it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's still running a business. You're employing people. So I started to like indirectly think maybe I should just be an entrepreneur. Like it seems like a grind, but it seems fun, right? That's how I thought of it as a kid. And then I started getting older. My mother was a consultant entrepreneur. And my dad was a longtime human rights director for the city of St. Paul for 13 years. And so then I started to see this kind of interesting, I would say, intersection of both people, meaning like what my dad would do in terms of culture, fighting for rights for all kinds of people, from Black, African American, American Indian to, Native American to gay, lesbian. Like I started to see that kind of work in terms of like inclusion and diversity with action, right? And then results from my dad. And then on my mom, she's the corporate person. So then I started to see corporate life. Like she was in marketing at General Mills for a long time. and then started doing consulting work afterwards, like most people do as they get more senior and they leave corporate, they consult. So I started to see that too, and like, oh, I could do that and do good, right? So basically, that's what I started to think about is how can I do what I like to do and do good for the people that look like me. And so then I graduated. I went to historically Black college from here, which I think is important because a lot of the Black community here, which is really small, and typically everybody knows each other in some way. I needed a little bit of a culture shock to go see like what are other people like me that want to be progressive and all that kind of stuff doing outside of this safety net of Minneapolis, St. Paul. And so I went to Tuskegee in Alabama, majored in marketing, and then I left and started my career, which even then was like an atypical move because I went to go work for a beer company, right? Where, a lot of people think about the beer industry, you don't think Black people, right? Like,
right.
Like there's not that connection to, unless you're talking about like Heineken, right? Which is like a stereotype,
Right.
So you start thinking like, why the heck did he do that? But I was like, well, okay. So I did that and I was like, what can I learn from here, right? So I learned how to build a brand, right? The concepts and the structure of what it's like to go do market research. Even though it was beer, it was like, I took away that it was beer. I just said this product. And then I started to learn the business of consumerization, right? Like, how does it work? How does the supply chain work? That was what I really was trying to learn. So I learned it. Then I was like, well, fast forward, I was only there for a year. And then I had an opportunity which a lot of people might not in their normal lifetime, and usually you associate to white people, right? Or to the majority is, my stepfather had a company that he built, and he started this one in 91 of October. So this company is basically the same age as me, like just like another kid. And so, my mother, they got married, my stepdad. So my stepdad's like, hey, you should come work at the company. At first I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And then I thought about it, and we had a deep conversation. And the reason why I bring this up, because it gave me a different perspective headed into my life at Microsoft, is I learned how to run a mid-sized company. So that company, when I was there, it was like 600 employees, like mostly like around the Eastern Seaboard. So I learned how to read financial statements, right? Assess other companies' value if we were thinking about an acquisition, right? Or what was it like to go work with and engage senior executives, right? To make sure you had business relationships aside from the service you were delivering in particular sites, right? So you learn all these kind of things. And then I left, right? And I left in a blaze, which is what I call it. I wrote a whole book on it called Collision Course, like not a shameless plug at all. It's just more, I did some things in my life that I made decisions and I had to live with the consequences, right? Yeah. And so that halted my journey in the family business, which I took for granted, right? Like
how old were you at the time?
I was 24.
Okay.
I'm 30 now. So, I mean, I just didn't take it serious, right? I was having too good a time. I was in Atlanta. I was, I was just having a good old time. And I was basically at a point of like, I probably didn't say it at the time, but now it's fine. I had like mental fatigue, right? And I wouldn't say depression. I think I was just mentally fatigued and confused, right? Like there were so many unresolved things that I didn't talk about or figure out or resolve. So it just festered over time and in a blaze is what I call it. Yeah. And then I basically, through relationships, and this is when I started to explore technology. Is why I tell you the story for context. Is I started interviewing, thinking like, okay, what am I gonna do now? Like I consulted for a couple months, like doing some design work and all that, trying to figure my life out. And I was like, what am I gonna do? So I interviewed with Google. And I remember that to this day, I went out to Mountain View. I was going to go join their Google AdWords team. I was like, oh, this would be so dope. And they were like, man, it's gonna cost X to live here. I was like, whoa, whoa, time out. Like I can't do that. Like, but I wasn't, I'm playing around, but it was like, it made me realize, like, man, this is like tech for real. Like,
Yeah.
this was 2015. So I mean, like, it's not like Google is like brand new, but to me at that time, I was like, Google as a company was like new to me,
Yeah.
right? It was weird. It was like, I know Google. It was like, this is different. Like, this is for real. Like, for work.
Like, this is a real physical place that I could.
Yeah, like this is this is not a browser. Like this, like a search engine. This is a real place.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is dope. And the reaction that people gave when I was like, yo, I'm interviewing with Google was like, yo, you got an interview with Google? Like, like, like they flew you out to where? That kind of thing. And fast forward, like I didn't go work for them, but then we had a family friend, longtime Microsoft guy, Michael. My mom was like, hey, you should talk to Michael. If you want to get into tech, you should talk to him. He's been at Microsoft for like 16 years, roles all over the world. So I talked to Michael. He was like, hey, we're working on a startup, or the company is, to reimagine like our inside sales, digital sales, how we go to market in the small, medium segment. And I was like, honestly, I don't know what you said, but it sounds good. Right. Like, I don't know. I just heard reimagine. I was like, sure, man, that sounds good. Right. Because I was trying to do the same with my life, right? I was like, I need to reimagine who I am. So I was like, okay, man. Then he was like, but you got to move to Fargo. And I was like, nope, cancel. Not happening. I'm from Minneapolis. I know I've been to Fargo.
Right.
Not doing that. I was like, I'm going to be the only Black person in Fargo.
Yep.
Right. And then I was thinking about, I was like, maybe I need to go isolate myself. Right. So my journey led me from thinking about going to being in like a big city to going to be in this remote location. Like, no one's like, let's go to Fargo. Like, let's move to Fargo.
Right.
But it had to be for something, right? So that was Microsoft. So I basically went to go work for a startup within Microsoft, like the behemoth. Mm-hmm. And that's where my story at Microsoft began. So I started intentionally as what they would call like a sales development specialist. I mean, all I was doing was qualifying other companies that wanted to use Microsoft's technology in some way or another for their business use. And then I started getting to a point where, in this sales structure, I was like, I just started closing deals myself. Mm-hmm. Like, I was supposed to pass them to somebody else, and I was like, I'm already talking to them. Like, I already built the relationship. I'm just gonna close the deal myself. And people were trying to figure out, like, why isn't he passing stuff? But they were like, well, we're getting money somehow. Like, something's not happening right there. He's a bottleneck for something. Right. And so through the conversation, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely a bottleneck, but I got deals. Like, I'm closing deals. I'm just not passing them to this other guy, or girl. Like, sorry. Right. I'm like, I'm good. Like, I was like, I came in to learn from the bottom up, which is like the entrepreneur. Like, my stepdad kind of gave me that a little bit. It's like, because I used to work third shifts because they have a facilities company. So I used to go work my day job and I would go work third shift. So I was like, that's the way I learned the operations, which is like the heart of the business. Yeah. I was like, well, I should just learn the basic roles. But I didn't know I would get the technology part. So I came in, and most people, when they start, they're like, I want to sell one of the easier products like Office 365, right? Like Outlook, things that like that you're familiar with as a consumer. But my sort of assigned product was Microsoft's Cloud Azure, right? So you start thinking of like all this like underlying architecture and all these technology stacks and these integrations. And I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. And I don't want to sell this because it's confusing, right? Yeah. It's probably the best thing that ever happened to me is learning the fundamentals of cloud computing 5 years ago, right? Like, because if you think about 5 years ago and where everything is at today, understanding the underlying infrastructure to how cloud computing affects all businesses, even us doing this interview today is running on a cloud, like a stack, a cloud. I don't know Zoom. I don't know if Zoom's AWS or what, but it's not Microsoft for sure.
Okay.
We know that. We know that for a
Right.
fact. Not on Microsoft. No, I think they are. I don't know. I don't actually know. I don't know. But my reason for bringing that up is like I started to make the connection between how technology drives company, right? Companies, and at a small level, I learned it in that first year at Fargo, and then I got 2 promotions, like relatively quick, and I basically moved from being a lead qualifier, to having my own territory. That at that time was like, I always tell people this because I remember it to this day. My territory was $8,422,614. That's when I got my territory. They were like, "This is what your territory is worth." I said, "Okay, cool. I'm gonna make sure this territory is like double digits. Like I need it to be like a." So when I was in that role for like a year as an account manager. And my territory finished at like 10 something. So I was like, "Cool. I had a great year." Like,
Yeah.
And through that, like I started getting exposure to senior leadership, and some like my sponsor reverse mentor is an EVP at the company. Like, so it's like reporting to our CEO, like, and we're like levels apart, right? And the point of all this is like I made a move, took a chance to go to Fargo, and it ultimately resulted in me building all these relationships and then accelerating my time from being a salesperson, which there's a lot of people who make a lot of great money and stuff as tech salespeople, to then going to headquarters in Seattle, which is for some people that are coming from I would say like external and then into Microsoft in a field role, like somewhere not in corporate, going to headquarters is like this big deal. And so then that helped me accelerate also like my exposure to other people, to products, all that kind of stuff, which kind of led me to where I'm at today, as a business architect in our customer success unit, helping basically lead our what we call Embrace, or our go-to-market partnership with SAP. And so making sure that as salespeople sell their deal, that our team, the team that's in the field that I'm responsible for from a strategy perspective, is actually working with their customers to consume technology, right, or to consume the cloud. So think back 5 years ago, it's like it's kind of come full circle in a way, where if I didn't have even the early exposure to cloud computing and selling it, it'd be really hard for me to even do what I do today, because I wouldn't have the underlying foundational information to help that I built on over the last 5 years to do what I do. And it's kind of funny because when I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect, like a real architect.
Yeah.
And so like when I think about it now, it's kind of like one of those like, oh, that's dope. I'm not actually drawing blueprints anymore, so to speak, but I come up with other blueprints, like our strategy for SAP and Microsoft, and how we're going to actually execute, and somehow I have to figure out how to influence other folks to get it done. So it's kind of tight being a business architect now. So long story, but I was like, it's kind of interesting to think through 5 years in a short period of time.
It's good. I mean, like I said, on our platform, we want to make sure people first have the chance to tell their story, and to inspire others, and let them know that sometimes the journey or the thought process isn't linear. You didn't wake up at 10 and be like, I'm gonna be in tech one day and work at this big company. You had this whole journey you went through. So, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you've had some privileges in growing up around entrepreneurs that were in your family, and kind of gave you some of that initial experience. And what it sounds like to me is confidence. Gave you some confidence that certain things are possible, right? Where some people may not even have parents that work in corporate, they're not entrepreneurs, stuff like that. So even some of the things that you did, moving around, there's some people that have never left their neighborhood.
True.
And so even here in Minnesota, there's some people that consider Chicago or Wisconsin Dells a vacation, right?
True.
So to have the kind of that confidence at a young age, like I'm going to move around, I'm going to live in Atlanta, I'm going to do these different things. Okay, I'm going to quit doing that. I'm going to go work for the family business. I
No.
think was, you know, a part of that foundation that kind of gave you the confidence to even think through some of the processes that you have. So what do you feel like were some of your struggles, or
Mm.
just some barriers that you feel like you faced in this journey?
Yeah, I think you're early on. Like it's a good question too, because like now that I've experienced some things, which early on I was like, I don't know how this is gonna work, right? Because I always figured out like who looks like me. That like I always used to think, okay, because I'm more relationship oriented, I was always like, who looks like me that is there, right, or is in this other spot. Um, and it became hard to like envision a career in a place, and you know I say this openly at Microsoft all the time. It's like it's hard to envision your trajectory if you don't have somebody that looks like you, like
Right.
to aspire to. And so like even that alone was hard for me because I'm like, there's got to be somebody here, right? Like somebody. So that was tough, like in early days, like understanding like the numbers, right? Like the the demographic of the company, and then extrapolating that out to like the demographics of the industry I decided to be in, which I was like, whoa, I should have just went to the league. like, then I would see everybody, but
Right.
and so it's funny because I'm like, whoa, like that was hard for me in the beginning. Like I had to learn how to move, right? Like I had to learn how to navigate and have conversations at varying altitudes. And I tell that to people like even that ask the question like, how did you get from this job to that job? It's like, well, I had to learn that the hard way too. It's like you can be you to an extent in corporate America. I try to tell people that like anybody will tell you like, oh, I'm my authentic self 100%. It's not possible. One, um, there's no way. And so I had to learn that too. Like, how do you balance being able to be you, but also play the game? And I brought this up to because George, the whole George Floyd thing happening here.
Mhm.
That happened here, and so there's this visceral reaction to everything happening, right? Like, it's just like everybody's so locked in on that. And
Yeah.
what they would ask me is, what can we do, right? And I'm gonna go back to the full part of your question, but I'm bringing this up for a reason. And my mom gave me this book. It's like 101 Ways to Know You're Black in Corporate America. When I started my career, and I was on this call like a month ago after a little bit of like settling happened after George Floyd's murder, and I said, "There's no book that exists that says 101 Ways to Know You're White in Corporate America." I
Yeah.
was like, "So this book doesn't exist. Like, if it does, I don't have it. I've never heard of it. Whatever. But there's one that exists for Black people."
Yeah.
And so I was like, that out the gate, especially at Microsoft when the Black population total is like 4% of 100,000 plus company. I was like, this is a problem. I was like, I had to learn like, yo, you just walked into an environment that was not made for you, right? And so I had to like really think through like, how am I gonna move? So that was the first like big learning I had early, especially going to Fargo. It made it real every day because I was like, I know all the Black people on this campus. Of 1,500 people, I know all the Black people. So I could see the math happening every day in real time. So that was one thing, which is there's other good things that came as a result of feeling like that. The other one is like, it's like, how do you really deliver? Because like there's this expectation for people. I think there's this like unspoken expectation of people in tech where it's like everything you do is like perfect. It's like it's great. Every like there's the smartest people in the world that work at some of these companies, and so the expectation level is always super high. And then being like a Black person, then you're Black male,
Yeah.
it's even higher. Like it's always it's like you got to be MJ all day,
Yeah.
right? Like I can't just be like a little role player and just get a bucket. Like I need to have like 30 a night every day, like
Yep.
every day. And I didn't realize to progress like how much that takes a toll on you, right? And so I had to learn, I had to learn like how do I manage, it's like load management in a way. Like
Yeah.
how do I manage my load? Because you want to perform, you want to exceed expectations and all that kind of stuff. But I also don't want to die on the Microsoft plantation, right? Like
Right.
I don't plan to do that. But you also have to learn, okay, what can I exert today in 4 hours that might take another person 8?
Right.
Like it's those kind of things that I had to learn the hard way, because like I would work on a project sometimes because I wanted to be 150% perfect.
Yeah.
And it would be like, damn, I took 8 hours to do that. And like somebody else might be working on something similar, or in another team, they're like, yo, it took me like an hour. I was like, what? Like, and so then you think about those things, you're like, I put in all this time. So just learning some of that kind of stuff, you learn the hard way, because it's exhausting, right? Like it's a mental grind, a physical grind that they don't tell you like in an interview or in school, right? Or as a kid, right? There's nothing that you can do to say, here's what the grind or the lifestyle will be, because it looks good, right? It's like, oh, you're a tech, man, you work at Microsoft.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, but I just had like an 80-hour week though. Like, like stuff like that. I think that's another thing. And then the other part, like at a company like Microsoft, is just like, how do you connect with people? Like for me, I think one of the biggest lessons I had to learn is, it's one thing to connect with somebody. It's another thing to like sustain it, right? Because
Right.
a lot of people are like, oh, they make the reach out for a very specific moment in time or objective for that thing, whatever they're trying to accomplish. Is really short term. What I learned is I'm gonna play the long game first. Like
Yeah.
it's like I can get you to like answer a question or point me in the right direction to somebody, or hey, you're an expert, like let's talk and can you answer this question or whatever. But it's like, how do you make that such a two-way conversation that there's like, how do you present your value to a person when you're asking them about something, right? It's
Right.
which is hard. Like it's a skill to learn. And I flubbed that up a few times, where I was like, man, I went to go ask some really smart people a question, and I either wasn't fully prepared for what I wanted them to give me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or wasn't prepared for what they said. Like I had one question, they asked 3 more, and it's like I don't have the answers.
Right.
Like, so it's like, well, why'd you reach out to begin with? Because I wasn't prepared. So you kind of learn those things. Like I learned that the hard way, which has helped in a lot of different regards, right? In Microsoft, outside of Microsoft, it's the value of relationship.
On that a little bit real quick, because that's a courtesy we're not granted as well.
Yeah.
Like to be able to ask a question and then receive homework versus judgment, right?
Yeah.
If you're like, how do I do this? And they're like, well, have you done this first? Now you're stressed because you're like, oh, I didn't. Now I feel stupid, and they're not gonna talk to me. Why did I even ask them? Where it's like, white people don't typically go through that. Not saying you don't feel that way. That's a human emotion to feel embarrassed or not smart enough or have those insecurities. But what they don't experience is the other person, basically condemning them to, well, come back and ask. And a lot of times what happens is we end up doing that to each other as well.
That's a fact.
Because I've talked to, older black men and women that, because they went through that, they've treated me like that. Same thing, go and ask a question and, oh, well, you're not ready. You got to, but then I help you to get ready. That's the problem.
Right.
One thing to be like, you're not ready. You should do this, this, and this.
Like, help me then.
Come back and then I'll tell you my opinion. It's just, you get you're not ready, and then, go figure it out and come back when you figure it out. Or, you may not get any type of response at all. So I know in entrepreneurship, like I've always been caught, especially, we're on the same age. I'm 31. Yeah. So it's like, I've been an entrepreneur for 13, 14 years. And it's like, I know there's been moments where I've done a certain amount of things that were impressive that then made it hard to, like you say, ask those questions, because I may have done something impressive in concerts.
Yeah.
And then
And
there
they're
may
like,
be
wait, you
something
noticed.
on
Like,
the operations side that I
yeah.
may be lacking, but everybody's looking, oh, you worked with celebrities, or you did this, you did that, you're so smart. And then it makes it hard to backtrack and be like, well,
I
you know,
still want to learn something else, or I'm
22, it's like, well, how do I do a profit and loss statement, or how do I do in a formal way, right? And
right.
then your judgment on that. So it's definitely we need the opportunity to learn and to be impressive, but still not have to know everything. And I know I've felt this, and you've probably felt this, where you just feel like you literally have to know everything.
Yeah, especially, and it's funny because I feel like I started to grow away from that now because I think that I've just gotten to the point where I'm like, look, I don't know all this shit, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know it all. I'm in a place, and I always get to the point where I'm like, I'm at a place where that's why y'all are here, right? Like, you all are here. You're somebody here is an expert. You were particularly hired for that skill, right? Like, you know that thing. I don't know that thing, right? And I think I think anybody, right, should start to like embrace the power that comes with being like, look, I don't know. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because the the sooner you can just articulate that and just be like, I don't know. That's why I'm asking. Like, versus going down the path of like, and I've seen this happen before too. It's like where you kind of want to know, like, seem like you know, and then you like come around at some point to like, oh, I didn't really fully know.
Yeah.
It's like it actually gives you more credibility. Like, and I said this with customers, like, I don't know. Because it's the human thing to say, right? It's like, I don't know. And it's okay. Like, I don't want to know. Like, I don't want to know, like, in the sense of like, I don't want to feel like I have to know.
Yeah.
Like everything coming into a conversation, which gives you power to create a space of learning, right?
Yeah.
And it's disarming to people, right? Like if you go to somebody who they know that they're a subject matter expert, and you come to them saying, "Hey, look, I don't know this, but you do, or I think you do.
Yeah.
If you don't, redirect me. But if you do know, hey, cool. I'll take what you are willing to give, and I'm gonna ask a whole bunch of questions. But I think that's what in the lesson I learned is if you are not just willing enough to be like vulnerable and say you don't know, but it's also in the process, you have to still be prepared,
Yeah.
right? To ask logical questions to get the results you want, right, out of that conversation, and to establish like runway for a next one,
Yeah.
right? Which is hard to do, like if you haven't done it before, because the first part is hard. It'd be like, oh, I don't know. Like a lot of people don't like to say I don't know, like but I'm like, shoot, I don't know. Like I don't know how to write an app. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the question you do want to say though is, do I know someone that does?
Right.
Right? So then you start to have to learn how to, a different skill of communication, right? Is I have to communicate well enough to get you to understand what I want done
Yeah.
based on your expertise or, space of knowledge around this topic. So it's like, okay, I might not be knowledgeable or deep, but I know what I want. I know the outcome. Like, and that's the thing. So you're learning how to use a different muscle, which is influence, right? It's like influence and communication at a very tactical level, which I think is something I had to learn. If you can't say you don't know, it's gonna be a tough road. Like, because then you put yourself in a bad spot if you start talking about something and you're wrong and you didn't say you don't know. Then it's all bad, because then it's like a credibility shot, right? It's
Right.
like, it's like you're better off saying you don't know versus start, yapping, and then it's like, what the heck are you talking about, dude?
Yeah. I arrived at the same conclusion probably about 3 or 4 years ago, where I
Yeah,
got to the point where I was confident enough to just say I don't know.
Yeah.
And for people watching, we call it culturally specific content. In our culture, we like to crack jokes and we like to feel special anytime we can. So if you don't know, you ain't seen what movie?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
like it's never just, oh, you don't know this? Well, this is what it is. It's always like,
Yeah.
you don't know that?
It's
Yeah,
like,
you
wow.
don't know that. Hey,
Yeah.
you don't know that. Okay?
That's
So,
exactly how it is.
so I think it stems from, kind of a childhood thing and a culture thing of wanting to feel special and smart in some way that then it starts affecting us all, and you kind of grow up holding that. And especially, just with racism and discrimination, we're always told we're not smart and we're not built to do certain things. So then that plays into it as well.
For sure.
But I got to a point where I looked at everything that I've done, and that's kind of what prompted me as well to do my documentary Farewell Mike J, because I'm like, I have 13 years worth of footage of me doing things that the world said I couldn't do,
Yeah.
both geographically, racially, age-wise. I had started a clothing line from scratch with no knowledge of the fashion business other than being fly,
Yeah.
and then sold around the world and got in the stores and figured all that out myself, right? Um, I launched Empire Studios and Men, which I still have. That's my film and photography services. I launched the premium experience and taught myself how to book celebrities and produce events and throw concerts and marketing. Taught myself graphic design, taught myself photography. I started writing screenplays and went to Hollywood at 23 to go get a deal on a feature film and all this self-taught, right? And but then there was still that problem of like, because now you're getting that praise, right?
That praise, yeah.
Being so smart and a genius.
Smart, you're the guy. You know everything.
And so those certain things you don't know, you're like, you still carry that. And I had ended up getting to the point where I was like, even if somebody is gonna razz a little bit or like harp on the fact I don't know something, I'm in a position where I'm like,
but here's everything I do know.
I know a lot.
Yeah, but here's what I do know.
I don't know.
Yeah, here's what I do know.
Tell me, I got it. Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, and if you don't know at that moment, it's like because of your other experiences, though, you're like, but I know how to find out.
Right, know how to find out, and like one thing I learned about myself, I just have great comprehension skills. I had to learn the way that I personally learn, not the way people want to teach me. Because if I learn the way I want to learn, I know what questions to ask. I know what I'm missing. I know what I'm strong at. And then once my mind grabs a hold of it, I'm good. So to give an example, we worked with an organization and did some stuff under my Blacks in Tech role. And like later on, it got back to me that somebody was like kind of questioning my credibility, like, well, what's his background? Is he in IT? Is he a developer? Blah blah blah. And so they were just getting back to me, and I'm like, that's goofy, because for what we're trying to do, which is build a community, produce these recruiting events, add culture, get other people added to the field. That's what I do.
That's what you do.
That platform, right? The premium experience. So, but just me being who I am, like I went and signed up for a boot camp, and like the first week I was like, building all the websites and the assignments and understanding everything. And it was a full stack boot camp. So it was HTML, CSS, Java, all these things. And I picked it up from scratch and was like, yeah, I understand this. I get this. And some things I get stuck on, guess what? I know how to Google, people. So I can go and figure out what that is. And I've done an IT course and all that. And I do all these things. Like right now I'm doing I mentioned to you earlier before we started the interview, the state of Minnesota has this deal with Coursera.
Yeah.
So anybody watching, if you're in Minnesota, all the classes on Coursera are free right now if you're in the state of Minnesota, and all you got to do literally is click the link, and it sets you up. You don't have to apply or anything.
Gotta sign up for that.
So I'm doing a diversity and inclusion course that ends up giving you a certificate. And it's like, why am I doing that? Am I going to become a diversity and inclusion officer? Probably not.
Right.
But in my role in what I'm doing with Black Tech Talent and dealing with recruiters, dealing with HR, dealing with newly appointed diversity and inclusion officers, it makes me more proficient in my role at Black Tech Talent. It makes me more proficient in the communication of some of those key points and just language. So I'm the type of person where if I don't know something, I can go figure it out. I have great comprehension. So now when I'm dealing with people that I want to work with or people that want to work with me, I make sure they understand that comprehension is what's important. It's not what I already know, because I can go find that out.
True.
I can probably execute it better than most, just because of the determination and the drive, and like you said, the not wanting to say I don't know. So if I say I don't know, best believe I'm gonna find out. We're gonna have to get together. So, and I think that's good for, like I said, our viewers, whether it's other Black people or people of color that need that confidence to say I don't know. And I think it's also important for some of these corporations that's going to be hiring our talent to understand, like, we're used to having to overwork to prove ourselves. And you're gonna, you mentioned retention earlier, like, appreciate that we over deliver a lot of times. So when we don't know something or we need to know something, like, support us in that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Without making us have, like you mentioned earlier, that mental fatigue where you're already operating at a high level and trying to prove yourself in these different areas. And then the moment you say, I don't know, now all of a sudden you're stressed because you're like, nah, I gotta act like I know it in this conversation. And then I gotta add that to everything else I'm doing and go figure it out. And then do that better than everyone else.
Right. Yeah. Then you gotta go do it for real. Like,
so yeah, that's definitely an important factor. So that's good, man. I think you have definitely an interesting journey, and you've talked about some of your different strengths and weaknesses. So another thing we usually touch on is just like discrimination factors on previous interviews we've done or conversations. One of them we discussed privilege within the African versus African American community. Another thing we discussed is colorism. We've discussed natural hair in the workplace. So what are some things you may have seen? It doesn't have to be at Microsoft, but just in your journey, that's something completely ridiculous, like not being able to wear your natural hair, right?
Oh, I got one for you. I got one. I got one. Because you'll relate to this. And I know maybe somebody said it, but I think it was so insane, right? To even have to feel this way.
Yeah.
Is ludicrous to me. What I remember, I first started growing a beard. And I'm gonna tell you about this because I think it's insanity. Is the perception or the bias towards a beard on a Black man?
Yeah.
There's so many, and so I was like, wow. I guess I never really thought about it because I just thought about it as facial hair. And I've seen white colleagues with beards. I've seen Indian colleagues, Middle Eastern like whatever, with beards, like full on. You can say it's cultural. I'm like, it's cultural for us too then. But I bring this one up because I just always thought it was ridiculous. Because like usually with corporate, there's a stigma that you got to have a smooth face, like you got to have be clean shaven. It's just a more polished look, right? Yeah. And I always thought this was ridiculous because like the correlation, and I've heard this said before, whether it was like I'm friendly feel or whatever, I don't know, but I've heard it said by non-Black people, like, so I just put it like that, like white folk, anybody, I've heard it. And it's basically like what the correlation is, or the reaction is, they see a Black person with a beard, and this is like in corporate or not, like there's this connection to you're aggressive because you have a beard.
Yeah.
And you're Black, right? Like you're aggressive, you are angry, right? You're gonna be mean or whatever. You're a rapper, right? Like you're some associated with some drug stuff. Like it's all these negative things, but it's like, but we're talking about a beard.
Yeah.
You're talking about a beard.
Yeah. Anything natural about us.
I was like, dog, and I've had black people actually, and I'm not even not in Microsoft and out, but that are like, hey, you should cut your beard because your white colleagues in particular could be afraid of that. I said, huh?
Yeah.
For how? Like we were in the same place.
You know what I think that stems from?
It's crazy. That's crazy. I know it's probably like a bad example, but it's like,
Oh, that's a perfect example. That's a perfect example, and I'm gonna tell you why. And before I go into this, for anybody watching, especially non-black people watching, this is the Black Tech Talent website. This is our content. It's culturally specific conversations. So if you don't like things that we're saying, this is not the forum for you to tell us or to complain about it or anything like that. This is an opportunity for you to watch and learn whether you agree with what we say or not. So with that said, because you see Nick Cannon just got in trouble and all this type of stuff. Now I can't get in trouble because I own a company, but I could have people decide not to work with you, which that's up to them.
right.
But what I'm gonna say is the truth, so it's important we have truthful conversations.
Agreed.
And the thing about the beard is, even going back to slavery and stuff like this, what were we called? A boy.
A boy, yeah.
Right? When white people get older, they talk about having boyish good looks. Like white people are extremely what can I say? They're extremely focused on like being youthful and staying young.
Yes.
Right. And so a beard usually symbolizes, even in a metaphorical sense, what? Wisdom, maturity, age, stuff like this, right? And so when you look at a black man, now you have all these other variables, the size, the age, the complexion, so now if you add a beard, well, it's hard to tell a man what to do, right? It's hard to tell somebody that looks intimidating to you what to do. It's hard to tell somebody who appears to possibly be older or wiser than you what to do. Yeah. So having that beard becomes because beards have to my knowledge never been a big part of gangbanging where it's like, yo, in this gang everybody got a beard. So what they got to do with bank robbing or being a thief or a thug or a gangster or anything, it all has to do with, one, they want to stay young, but they still want to have a position of authority. And so to tell you, I mean, an afro is how your hair naturally grows. Imagine telling a white woman her hair has to be short.
Yeah, or it's like, hey, your hair needs to be nappy.
Yeah,
like I'm just using that like loosely because it's like, or natural because it's like that's the like it's not possible.
This is how it grows,
Right.
and just discussing diversity and inclusion, and even in the course that I've taken, diversity is one thing and inclusion is another one, right? Diversity is saying we're going to hire and interact with people from different backgrounds, and inclusion is we're going to include them in our ecosystem in a way that it feels natural to them as well, right? And yeah. So if in my culture beards are respected, if in my culture women love men with beards, if in my culture that's the thing that we do, then to have to sacrifice something that I do outside of work in order to impress one facet of my life or our lives, which is work. Yeah. Work isn't your whole life. That's one part of it, right? And so it's like literally sacrificing who you are, sacrificing your culture to please an organization that may fire you, lay you off, or may not be treating you well from the get-go, right? Yeah. And so we jump through, and this is the learning moment for people watching, we jump through a lot of hoops to please these organizations. in these people, and from being intelligent to overworking to how we appear to fit in, to even code switching the way we talking versus using slang, to even switching the tones of our voices.
Yeah, that's what, man.
Yeah. So
there's so many of these little micro things that happen, man.
And it's like, we can be admired for our differences, which is also like a worry too, because you could have the ignorant side where, like I said, it's kind of that fear, or this is how we do things. If you want to fit in here, you got to do it like that as well, even though there's just a big cultural difference in that.
Yeah.
But it's also part of it is that the things that we have that is now kind of being celebrated and people are liking. Now there's people who are like, I don't like that, I can't do that. So for the longest, we were told our hair was trash and it's nappy and it's coarse and all this. And now that over the last 2-3 years has been a celebration of black hair, and there's more products to properly take care of black hair. Now it's like, I don't like that your hair, especially for black women, it's like, I don't like that your hair looks that great and my hair is just whatever, these 2-3 styles. So I don't want you to do that. You got to have your hair like this. But like we went through all this time of being disrespected about our hair. And we shouldn't even be having a conversation about hair in the workplace unless it's something absolutely ridiculous.
Unless we like work in the hair industry, and it's not like about your hair. It should be about other hair, like like customers. Yeah.
So it's dumb. It's a crazy thing. I know I went to one of the venues here, one of the bars, and like the bouncer was like, you gotta tuck your chain in. Are you afraid that I'm gonna go in here and with this chain I'm wearing, I'm gonna steal all the women, or like, what is this kind of, even with, I was just thinking about this the other day, when it comes to hats, like how many bars and restaurants are like, you can wear a hat, but
it be a certain kind of hat though.
It can't be flat brimmed.
Yeah.
Like, what does this flat brim do to intimidate you or make you feel like I'm up to no good? And it's really literally just telling black people, can't do what we want you to do, or don't come in.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I know. It just made me think of that, man. That beard thing just driving me crazy. Like, how does that work? Like, how does it work? I'm like, so now, and then even when you have one, it's like, I've even heard like older guys that have been in corporate tell me like, it's just how it is. I was like, well, I guess I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense, because I'm like, we should be talking about what my output is as a person, especially in the 21st century. I'm like, you're really talking to me about beards.
Yeah.
Versus the output of this report or this project or whatever it is. Yeah. Or like, I can't work with you because I'm afraid of you because of beard. It don't even sound right. Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. But that's one for sure. Like, I think just flat out, I just don't get. I don't get it.
Yeah, I think there's an audacity too, like, for black people, especially black men, to have the audacity to feel comfortable being themselves, or feel like we've proven ourselves at a certain point to that we can kind of relax, and that's across the board, honestly, with different ethnicities feeling like that, even with other black people feeling like that, some black women feeling like that, where it's like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Like, who do you think you are to go against the grain? Who do you think you are to feel comfortable in this position? Somebody else who will comply with everything we want will be happy to take your spot. And it's like, I think I'm great. That's who I think I am.
Hey, that's how it should be. Hey, I mean, I feel like that a lot too. Like, it's kind of funny, because the other one that I always think about And usually you go to meetings and things, and it's like, oh, I have to wear certain things, I have to do certain things. The moment, like I just gave up. I was like, man, I'm done with that. I'm wearing sneakers or wherever I want, wherever I go.
Yeah.
And I'd be at room, it'd be like sport coats, and I get okay.
Yeah.
So, it would just be like the uniform. My dad always calls it the uniform. It's either navy jacket, khaki pants, right? Or gray pants. It's one of the two, right? And I'm like, I'm not wearing that. I'm wearing what I want to wear. Like, I like wearing sneakers. I like wearing whatever I want, but in particular sneakers. And it's been interesting over the last few years how, like, before you might not say it because, like, you're like, it's more culturally relevant to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But over the last like couple years, it's been like, if I go on me, they're like, oh wow, like, oh, you have on sneakers. I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Like, today is that day, just like every other day.
Yep.
Like, you have to, and then it's like, oh man, it's almost like, oh, I could wear that too then. I was like, sure. Like, it's weird how it's like at the same time we are discriminated against for certain things, and then immediately once we do it, it's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's like it's this weird construct that we live in all the time.
Well, see, that's that fear that I was just mentioning.
I know.
I don't want other people to think you're cool.
Yeah, I just want them to be like, he's going against what we usually do. That's what it is.
And so when you have that that kind of attitude, it doesn't create. There's enough. This is what I tell people, whether it's entrepreneurship, relationships, anything. We have to have an abundance mind state. Just like you talked about your upbringing with your father and your stepfather, and just having that, you got to see there are possibilities, right, to be business owners and stuff like that, and be successful at it. And a lot of times we are trained to have a scarcity mindset, which is why there's that crabs in a barrel effect. And so sometimes we have to see somebody that looks like us, that comes from where we come from, to kind of give us that permission to also do that. And so when it spills over into other cultures, sometimes they don't like that.
No.
You're like, he's not your influence, I'm your influence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like,
he's cool though. He's got the J's, he's got some Yeezys on. He looks comfortable. His feet don't look like they hurt, And it's like when you're inclusive, you allow and you think in abundance, you realize, there's some people that are going to think he's cool and follow him. There's some people that's going to stay traditional. Even in the course that I've taken, they're saying that this is the first time we really had like 4 generations work at a company at once. So you have, at the very top, the people that are in their 80s and up that are still having board seats and CEO and all this type of stuff, all the way down to the 18, 19, 20-year-old.
Yeah.
You really got the 4 different generations all in one place. Yeah. And so there's going to be people that, they're going to be, if you're on time, you're late. There's going to be those people. Going to be the people they don't even have nothing in the wardrobe other than suits and dress shoes and ties and everything like that. They only the thing else they got is a Hawaiian shirt. Right. And then you're going to have the millennials that are like, I'm going to come do my job. I'm going to do it well, but I'm also going to be comfortable, and I'm going to have fun, and I'm going to want to work from home if I can. And I want my vacation days. Like my aunt, before she retired, she hadn't used vacation or sick time in like years.
Yeah, she was just racking them up.
So it's like, well, she just wasn't going anywhere, and she just from that, she's older, so she was just from that. Like, if I'm not going anywhere, I'm not going to use them. Where like millennials, we're like, man, I need a mental break. You know what I'm saying? I need a health break. I need a sick day. I need to go out of town and enjoy some life real quick. And so, with that though, bringing it back to the point, is like there doesn't have to be a fear of a takeover, because any change that's going to happen is happening regardless, and you're just trying to stand in the way. So some things are change, but some things are just inclusiveness, where it's like now we have somebody who represents for the people who like doing that, who like having beards, who like wearing sneakers, and still do their job extremely well.
Exactly.
And that makes it more. That helps you attract more talent.
More talent. That's how it works. It's like you make it so they can come and be who they really are.
Yeah.
And allow their gifts to come out at the same time, right? The talent to come out.
I was at a summit at Target, and this was right before last year's BitCon.
Mm-hmm.
This was after I did my entertainment summit fame, and so I had met some people who had met me at the prior BitCon and heard me speak and stuff like that. And they were just like, man, you come in and like you're dressed cool and you do what you want to do and you speak how you want to speak. Like, how did you get that level of confidence? And I was just like, well, there's a couple of things. I said, one, I look good in a suit, but for me to get a suit, it's got to be tailor-made. My shoulders are the width of a doorway. And that's the hardest part to adjust, right? And it's like, I don't wear suits in my everyday life. I'm not required to. Work in entertainment, hip hop, and startup culture is being comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I could do that, every once in a while if the occasion's right, or if it's something that I feel like I want to do, because I look good in it. But I can't just go to. I mean, I was getting ready for a friend's wedding, and I had literally went to anywhere from Men's Warehouse, the K&G, just to try to get something, to even there's a big and tall spot in Burnsville that I went to, and like no matter, because I'm 5'11", so I'm not necessarily super tall, so I don't necessarily fit the big and tall category. So those things have to still be tailored down, right? Because they're too long. And I go to K&G and get their biggest size, and it fits everywhere but the shoulders and the arms. Looks like somebody's bouncer, right? And so part of it is just like, that's just not a part of the life that fits for me. Number one. I'm like, number two, I have my own businesses, so I kind of make my own rules, and I work with who I want to work with, especially for me. So I'm still going to be clean cut. I'm still going to be presentable. I might still wear a dress shirt or a button up or a cardigan or a turtleneck or what. Like, it's still going to be clean and professional. But if I have to wear a suit for you to respect me, there's a lot of gangsters and criminals in suits. So I shouldn't have to do that. And luckily, like, I've just been able to work with some great organizations that was never a problem, whether it was with Black tech talent, whether it was with Blacks in Tech, whether it was with Premium. Nobody ever was like, it never got, things usually get back to me one way or another, and it's never gotten back to me that, we like him, but he wore that Premium hat, or he didn't wear a suit when he came to meet us. Like, no, I'm gonna be early. I'm gonna come bearing gifts. It's times where I've gone to meetings and I found out how many people were going to be there. I asked if people were vegan, if they're vegetarian, and I go in there and everybody's straight faced. And then I'm like, I brought food. You know what I'm saying? And the food, this one meeting, the food just sat there for like the first 30 minutes of the meeting. In my head, I'm like, dang, y'all ain't gonna eat. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was straight face, like, why are you here type of thing. Then probably in the middle of my presentation, all of a sudden that first hand went out, pulled some food, and someone's like, get some food. And I'm like, cool. So now everybody's happy. And like I said, I had the vegan, the vegetarian, and the regular options. And so I come with good energy. I come with positivity. I come with goodwill and all that. But you're not going to force me to then be. If I'm here to make you comfortable, don't force me to be uncomfortable in order to do business with you.
I like that.
So that's, I think that's important. Like I said, the reason why we do these interviews is to educate the people that are watching. So that's why we want to have these type of conversations and some of these nuances that you're not going to mention that in an interview. You're not going to be like, hey, one day I'm going to grow a beard. You might feel uncomfortable, so let me know now. Like, you got to get a job, right?
Yeah.
You got to get in there and kind of learn the work culture and everything like that. So, no, the beard is a good example, and it's ridiculous. And that's what I want. Every conversation, discussion, episode, like, I want somebody to listen to something that's going on to this day.
Yeah.
Really be like, wow, that is ridiculous. Like, why are we telling people they can't grow facial hair?
Yeah.
Why are we telling Black women they can't have curly hair, natural hair, or an afro, or whatever it may be? Why are we acting like we don't understand colorism or tokenism or these different things? Why can't somebody wear sneakers, to work? Unless you're, like I said, there are certain things, you're in sales, and if you're dealing with that older generation, they're 100% going to judge you on that. And I don't judge them on that because that's their time frame.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be the same with tattoos.
Same
thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's another one. I used to be like, dang, man, I got to wear a long sleeve shirt everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? And then I just was like, I don't care. Like,
exactly.
I know y'all got one somewhere.
Yeah. So it's a lot of times that, like you said, it'll be a double standard too, because they'll have one, the kids or somebody will have one, but it's an issue if you have one.
Right.
Like I said, that's just sometimes it's a racial thing, but sometimes it's a generational thing. Like I said, I've heard older Black men who, like I said, they're wearing suits every day to work, and they've been through certain things and they carry themselves a certain way, and they'll call you a thug for wearing sneakers and having a tattoo, right?
Right.
And so, sometimes it's just kind of that mind frame, and I try to be empathetic to that time and that journey, because their survival was different from our survival.
Yeah, true.
Even though our generation is going through what we're going through, it's not as difficult as what they were going through when they were going through.
Agreed.
Right? And so I try to be empathetic to that, even though the notion is still incorrect. I still try to take it from a place of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Likewise, I do too. Even though it drives me crazy, but
right.
I get it.
Definitely. Well, yeah, this was a great conversation. Thanks for joining us. We've done some things in the past. Hopefully, we can do some more things in the future.
Yeah, yes, indeed. The city needs it. That's the thing.
Definitely. We're both Minnesota natives, so we've traveled and seen how other places operate, and we want to bring some of that here.
Exactly.
And make it even better in our environment. So that's awesome. If you want to shout out anything, your social media, or just any final words, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the worst for that, but I have IG if you want to follow me. It's at CatchPT on IG.
That's the perfect IG handle for you as well, because they ain't gonna catch you. So that's the perfect one. Go ahead.
I was like, you better have that cell phone. Hey, that email, boy, you get that email, man.
Yeah.
I might move that meeting.
Definitely gonna move the meeting. I already know the meeting's getting moved, but like I said,
I'm working on that. I'm working on that.
I understand it. Like I said, you're putting in that work and proving yourself.
It's good intention. It's with good intention. Just know I love you. It's like I'm sorry. But no, if I had to leave with any parting thoughts though, it would be more around like seek understanding if you don't know, right? Because there's been so many people that are where you want to be, and it doesn't matter the generation. It's young people to a younger person, or to somebody that's the same age, like me to you, right? I was like, hey, do you know a developer? Like, I don't. So it's like that, okay, cool. Like, as you, I obviously I do work at Microsoft, but like in the context of here, it's like, do you know somebody? And it's like you ask these questions, or like, don't be afraid to say you don't know. I think that's the theme of what I was getting to earlier is for anybody watching this is more, don't be afraid to say you don't know something, but also be open to go to learn, right? And build that muscle. And I would say like figure out what you really like think your purpose is, because your purpose might not be in a corporation, right? It might be creating something else that doesn't exist, or making something better that it does exist. And I think that's worth your time and effort, and really thinking that through before you start going on any journey just to say you work in corporate or something, and then learn some of the skills that are important today. Like, Mike, you touched on it. Some of that stuff is like learn how to code. Like you have to be like willing, and I think that's the difference from people that are successful or do something well, is they're willing to put the time in, even if they don't have to. Like that's the other part. Like you didn't even have to. Right. You did it anyway, right? Like, and so it's like, if you can like humble yourself to that point, like as somebody that hasn't even gotten started yet, like to start off humbly, like you'll go a long way. And then just do things the right way. Like I think that's another like big takeaway I would leave with people, is just build relationships and do right, like do it the right way. Cause like that stuff, man, relationships come back full circle. And however you go into that relationship and build it and foster it, like if it's a negative one, it's gonna come back, and it comes back with a vengeance, and it comes back at the worst time, right? And so, value relationships and invest in those as well. But those would be some of my like parting thoughts. Yeah. Mike's like, dude, you need to get off. Like, no, you good. No, I appreciate the time though, for sure, to be able to share the journey, and hope the viewers kind of learn from some little piece of nuggets or a gem here and there to help on theirs. So. Sure. With that said, we're out. Peace.